filled with mud. These rough-hewn logs were filled with sap, and as they dried out, the wood contracting and expanding with changes in temperature, the roofs sagged, the walls buckled. The narrow clay-daubed chimneys leaned, as though some unseen pressure were forcing them over. Seen from a distance, these sway-backed cabins seemed to huddle together, as though for protection. The fact that they were exactly alike, that they were surrounded by the same barren, hard-packed earth, furthered the illusion. The cabins were exactly alike inside, too. There was a crude fireplace, with one or two black iron pots standing in front of it. The hearth was merely a continuation of the dirt floor. When the wind blew hard, smoke came down the chimney, into the room in puffs, so that the walls were smoke-darkened. Even in summer, there was a characteristic smoky smell in the cabins. The fireplace not only provided heat in winter, it was the source of light, and it was used for cooking. Piles of old worn-out blankets served as beds. There were no chairs, so the occupants of the cabins either squatted in front of the fire or sat on the floor. In the middle of the dirt floor there was a large, fairly deep hole covered over with loose boards. This was the potato hole, where sweet potatoes were stored in winter to protect them from the frost. Harriet Green, who was usually called Old Rit, and her husband, Benjamin Ross, both slaves, lived in one of these windowless cabins in the quarter on the Brodus plantation. They had several children, some of whom still lived with them. The older children were hired out by the master, Edward Brodus, to farmers who needed slave labor, but who could not afford to buy slaves. In 1820, Old Rit had another baby. There was no record made of the date of the birth of this child, because neither Old Rit nor her husband, Ben, could read or write. Like most people who live close to the land, and who have neither clock nor calendar, they measured time by the sun, dividing it roughly into sun-up, sun-high, sun-down. The year was not divided by months, but by the seasons. It was separated into seed time, cotton blossom time, harvest, Christmas. One year was distinguished from another by its happenings, its big memorable occurrences. The year of the big storm, the year of the early frost, or the long drought, the year the old master died, the year the young master was born. Old Rit and Ben decided that they would call this new baby Araminta, a name that would be ultimately shortened to Minta or Minty. This would be her basket name or pet name, and would be used until she grew older. Then they would call her Harriet. That year would be separated from the others by referring to it as the year Minty was born. News, good or bad, traveled swiftly through the quarter. All the slaves knew that Old Rit had another baby. That night, they left their own cabins, moving like shadows, pausing now and then to listen, always expecting to hear the sound of hoofbeats, loud and furious along the road. A sound that meant that the patrollers were hunting another runaway. Only they added an extra syllable to the word, making it pataroller. Then, moving quietly, quickly, they slipped inside Ben's cabin to look at the new baby. They arrived in groups, 2 or 3 at a time, and stood looking down at the baby. It was a girl. They already knew that, but they asked whether it was a boy or a girl out of politeness, and asked what her name would be, though they knew that too. Girls were not worth much, and Old Rit already had a passel of children.